What if I told you that in 1998, for less than $8 million, a man with no publicly known client list, no transparent portfolio, and no legitimate explanation for the scale of his fortune, purchased a private island in the United States Virgin Islands, a 70-acre island, accessible only by boat or helicopter, surrounded by open Caribbean water, an island that would become, according to federal prosecutors' sworn victim testimony and thousands of pages of court documents, the operational center of one of the most extensive sex trafficking networks in modern American history. An island where young girls were flown in on private jets, and where the nearest help was miles of open ocean away. Stay until the end of this episode, because the property records, the building permits, and the words spoken under oath by survivors paint a picture that no amount of money could ever erase. I'm Mark Epstein, and this is the Epstein Files. The year is 1998. Jeffrey Edward Epstein is 45 years old. On paper, he calls himself a financial consultant, a money manager to the ultra-wealthy. His primary known client is Leslie Herbert Wexner, the billionaire founder and chairman of the Limited Inc., the parent company of Victoria's Secret, Bath and Body Works, and other retail brands. Through his relationship with Wexner, a relationship that has never been fully explained to public satisfaction, Epstein has built a personal fortune estimated in the hundreds of millions of dollars. Source: Vanity Fair, The Talented Mr. Epstein, March 2003, SEC filings related to the Limited Inc., Wexner's public statements, 2019. By 1998, Epstein already controls an extraordinary portfolio of properties. He resides at 9 East 71st Street in Manhattan, one of the largest private residences in New York City, a townhouse reportedly transferred to him by Wexner in 1989 through a transaction whose terms remain murky. Source: New York City Property Records, reporting by New York Times, Miami Herald. He owns a waterfront estate at 358 El Brillo Way in Palm Beach, Florida. Source: Palm Beach County Property Appraiser Records. He holds a ranch of approximately 8,000 acres near Stanley, New Mexico, known as Zorro Ranch. Source: Santa Fe County Property Records. But in 1998, Epstein makes the acquisition that will define his criminal operation. He purchases Little St. James Island, a roughly 70-acre island in the U.S. Virgin Islands, situated approximately 1 mile southeast of St. Thomas in the Pillsbury Sound. According to property records filed with the United States Virgin Islands Office of the Lieutenant Governor, Division of Real Property Tax, the purchase price was approximately $7,950,000. Source: USVI Property Records, reporting by Miami Herald, Perversion of Justice series. But here's where it gets disturbing. What Jeffrey Epstein built on that island, and what survivors say happened behind its gates, would take more than 2 decades to fully come to light. To understand what Little St. James became, you first need to understand what it was, and what Epstein turned it into. Before Epstein's purchase, the island had passed through various private owners. It sits within the territory of the United States Virgin Islands, meaning that United States federal law, including federal criminal statutes, applies there. That fact will become critically important. The island is accessible only by boat or by helicopter. There is no public ferry service, no bridge, no commercial infrastructure. If you're on Little St. James, you are there because someone brought you, and you leave when they decide you leave. Source: USVI Territorial Geographic Records, FAA Records. After taking possession, Epstein did not merely occupy the island, he transformed it. Over the following years, he oversaw an extensive and continuous construction campaign. Building permit records filed with the United States Virgin Islands Department of Planning and Natural Resources document a series of projects spanning from the late 1990s through the 2010s. Source: USVI DPNR Building Permit Records, Aerial Photography Analysis. The development was staggering in scope. Epstein constructed a main residential compound, multiple guest houses, a library, a cinema, a fitness facility, a commercial-grade kitchen and dining area, private docks, a helipad, and a network of paved roads across the island. And then there was the structure that would become the island's most infamous feature. A blue and white striped building topped with a golden dome, resembling a temple or pavilion, visible in aerial and satellite photographs. Its exact purpose has never been fully explained in any court record. Source: aerial photography entered into federal evidence. FBI evidence photographs referenced in Case 19 CR 490 SDNY, USVI building permit records. The infrastructure served one overriding purpose: total control. Epstein controlled who arrived. He controlled the boats. He controlled the aircraft. He controlled the communications. He controlled the staff. Former employees would later testify under oath that Epstein maintained rigid authority over every aspect of life on Little St. James. And the flight logs, subpoenaed during the original 2006 Palm Beach Police Department investigation and later federal proceedings, document the traffic. Epstein operated multiple aircraft, most notably a Boeing 727-200 with FAA tail number N908JE, as well as smaller aircraft including a Gulfstream II. These planes regularly flew between Teterboro Airport in New Jersey, Palm Beach International Airport in Florida, Cyril E. King Airport in St. Thomas, and other domestic and international destinations. Source: FAA aircraft registration records. Flight logs subpoenaed in Case 0880736 CIV SD FLA Palm Beach Police Department investigation files. Those flight manifests documented passengers traveling to and from St. Thomas, the gateway to Little St. James. The logs show a pattern of regular flights carrying Epstein named associates and, according to federal prosecutors, young women and underage girls. Source: flight logs entered as evidence in multiple federal proceedings. Miami Herald, Perversion of Justice, Part 3. Now, if you're still here, it means you can handle the truth. So let me show you what they didn't want you to see. I'm Mark Epstein, and this is the Epstein Files. Every file matters. During the trial of Ghislaine Maxwell, United States of America versus Ghislaine Maxwell, case number 20 CR 330, in the United States District Court for the Southern District of New York, multiple witnesses testified under oath about what happened on Little St. James Island. The trial was conducted from November 29th through December 29th, 2021, before the Honorable Judge Allison J. Nathan. On December 29th, 2021, the jury convicted Maxwell on 5 of 6 counts, including sex trafficking of a minor. Witnesses at trial, several identified by pseudonyms to protect their identities, described a recurring pattern: recruitment, often initiated or facilitated by Ghislaine Maxwell; transportation, frequently on Epstein's private aircraft or by boat to the island; and then sexual abuse, occurring in the isolation of a private island where escape was functionally impossible. One witness, identified at trial as Jane, testified about being brought to Epstein's properties, including Little St. James, beginning when she was approximately 14 years old. She described how the island's remoteness was not incidental. It was the point. She testified that she felt she could not leave, could not call for help, and could not refuse what was being demanded of her. The ocean itself was the wall. Another key witness, known as Kate, testified about similar experiences: being flown to the island, being introduced to Epstein's world through Maxwell's grooming, and being subjected to sexual abuse. Virginia Giuffre, formerly Virginia Roberts, provided extensive accounts in her own civil litigation. In Giuffre versus Maxwell, case number 15 CV07433, Southern District of New York, filed in 2015. Giuffre described in sworn depositions being recruited by Maxwell at the Mar-a-Lago Club in Palm Beach, Florida. when she was approximately 16 years old, around the year 2000. She described being brought to Little St. James Island on multiple occasions. She described sexual abuse by Epstein, and she alleged, under oath, that she was directed to have sexual contact with other powerful individuals. Allegations that have been the subject of extensive litigation and public disclosure through the unsealing of documents in 2019 and subsequent years. Former island employees also contributed testimony. During the Maxwell trial, accounts from staff members described strict operational rules. Employees were instructed not to make eye contact with guests, not to discuss what they observed, and to adhere to protocols that, viewed in the full context of the criminal case, were designed to conceal ongoing criminal activity from scrutiny. This is not conspiracy. This is court record. Pause. The federal indictment of Jeffrey Epstein himself, case number 19 CR 490, Southern District of New York, returned by a grand jury in early July 2019, specifically referenced conduct occurring at Epstein's residence in the United States Virgin Islands as part of the sex trafficking conspiracy. Epstein was arrested on July 6, 2019 at Teterboro Airport upon arriving from Paris, France. He pleaded not guilty. He would never stand trial. Source: Pacer. Pause. This is where the official story falls apart. In 2002, just 4 years after purchasing Little St. James, Jeffrey Epstein entered into an agreement with the United States Virgin Islands Economic Development Commission, known as the EDC. Under this program, Epstein established an entity called Southern Trust Company, Incorporated, which was registered and purportedly based on the island. In exchange for maintaining an office and a minimum number of employees in the USVI, Epstein received extraordinary tax benefits, including a reported 90% reduction in personal income taxes and substantial reductions in corporate taxes. Let that settle. Pause. A man who was using a private island to systematically traffic and abuse underage girls was receiving tax incentives from the very territory where those crimes were being committed. The territorial government was, in effect, financially subsidizing his presence, and these benefits continued for years. Epstein maintained his EDC tax status through multiple territorial administrations. Even after his 2008 guilty plea to state prostitution charges in Palm Beach, case number 2006 CF 009454, and his subsequent registration as a sex offender, the USVI continued to extend his tax benefits. Epstein reportedly maintained his EDC status until at least 2018. Source: USVI EDC records. It was not until January 15, 2020, 5 months after Epstein was found dead in his cell at the Metropolitan Correctional Center in Manhattan on August 10, 2019, that USVI Attorney General Denise George filed a sweeping civil enforcement action against Epstein's estate. That complaint alleged, in devastating specificity, that Epstein brought girls as young as 11 and 12 years old to Little St. James, that he used his corporate structures in the USVI to facilitate trafficking, and that territorial authorities had received information about Epstein's conduct but failed to act appropriately. Pause. Attorney General Denise George was removed from her position in January 2023, reportedly shortly after she joined a lawsuit against JP Morgan Chase for the bank's role in facilitating Epstein's financial activities. The circumstances of her removal have been disputed, and the full reasons have not been publicly clarified. So here is what we are left with. Pause. A private island, purchased in 1998 for just under $8 million, developed into a controlled, surveilled compound. A tax incentive program that placed territorial officials in a financial relationship with the island's owner. Flight logs showing years of regular traffic, victim after victim, in courtrooms under oath, before federal judges, describing the same patterns of recruitment, transportation, and abuse in the same location. Pause. And for more than a decade, nothing happened. Pause. The first serious law enforcement inquiry into Epstein, the Palm Beach Police Department investigation led by Detective Joseph Recaray, beginning in approximately March 2005, focused primarily on Epstein's Palm Beach estate. But the evidence uncovered there pointed clearly to a network that extended far beyond Florida, reaching to New York, New Mexico, Paris, London, and the United States Virgin Islands. The powerful bury the truth, but paper has a longer memory than power. I read every single one. I'm Mark Epstein, and I'll see you in the next file. When that original federal investigation was resolved through the controversial non-prosecution agreement in 2007 and 2008, negotiated between Epstein's defense attorneys and then United States Attorney for the Southern District of Florida, R. Alexander Acosta, the agreement effectively shielded Epstein and unnamed potential co-conspirators from federal prosecution at that time. Filings related to this agreement are associated with case number 08-82736-CIV in the Southern District of Florida and the NPA-related proceedings under case number 08-8099. It would take 11 more years for the Southern District of New York to bring new federal charges. 11 years during which Epstein continued to use his island. 11 years during which he continued to receive tax benefits. 11 years during which more girls were brought to Little St. James. Court records and victim accounts indicate the abuse continued throughout this period. The financial institutions that served Epstein also eventually faced consequences. In 2023, J.P. Morgan Chase agreed to settle claims related to its banking relationship with Epstein for approximately $290 million. Deutsche Bank settled similar claims for approximately $75 million. These settlements acknowledged, at minimum, failures in due diligence and compliance. Those funds contributed to compensation for survivors, but no dollar amount restores what was taken on that island. Let me bring this back to where it began. In 1998, Jeffrey Epstein purchased Little St. James Island for approximately $7.95 million. Over the next 2 decades, that island became, according to federal prosecutors, according to a convicted co-conspirator, according to the sworn testimony of survivors who stood in federal courtrooms and spoke the truth at enormous personal cost, the centerpiece of a criminal enterprise. After Epstein's death, the island and the neighboring Great St. James Island, which Epstein purchased in 2016 for a reported $18 million, became part of his estate. The islands were sold in 2023 for a reported combined price of approximately $60 million. The buyer has stated intentions to redevelop the property. The buildings can be torn down. The roads can be repaved. The Blue Temple can be demolished. And by many accounts, it has been. But the testimony exists. The court records exist. The flight logs exist. The words spoken by survivors under oath in the Southern District of New York, those words are permanent. The powerful bury the truth. But paper has a longer memory than power. If this episode opened your eyes, hit subscribe and the bell icon, because every file matters. Comment below. What questions do you still have about the island? I read every single one. Share this before it disappears from your feed. Next file, we crack open the flight logs. Tail number N908JE. The Boeing 727 they called the Lolita Express, and the passenger names documented on those manifests will tell you more about who enabled Jeffrey Epstein than any press conference ever did. I'm Mark Epstein, and I'll see you in the next file.